People assume that all the war dead are buried in graves on the continent, but did you know that there are more than 130 Commonwealth War graves from the First World War right here in Sutton? Here at Sutton Cemetery, it's one of the largest groups of these graves, and I'm here to talk to Tony Brett Young about a new project called Sutton Living Memory, which aims to put stories behind the names on these gravestones. So Tony, how did Sutton Living Memory come about?
Well, it's an idea I picked up from the Commonwealth War Graves Commission's website about a project that was being carried out in the north of England called Adopt a Grave. And it was just that. Local groups were invited to come along and look after and maintain the graves of World War I and World War II veterans who were buried in their local cemetery. And I thought that's something we could do here in Sutton. And the commemoration of the Great War, of course, has been an ideal time to initiate it.
Yeah, so why are there so many First World War graves in Sutton?
Well, there are about 130 altogether, and they're scattered around 6 graveyards, 6 cemeteries. These are probably people who came back badly wounded and who died of their wounds, or came back and for some other reason died around about the time of the Great War and are buried here. And they have Commonwealth War Graves Commission headstones, and they're recognisable because they're all the same. And the idea was that each of them would look the same so that nobody took precedence over anybody else.
The thing that I find fascinating about this is actually there's very little information to go on, a lot of questions asked. I mean, what do we know about the stories behind these people?
Well, we don't know a lot about most of them, and that's what the aim of the project is, to try and find out more about them, to commemorate the services that they provided. But they come from a whole range of different backgrounds and professions and age groups, but virtually all men, of course. We have one woman that we're commemorating, and she was a munitions worker who was killed in an explosion in a local munitions factory.
So what's the main thrust of this project? Is it just to look after them and now and long into the future?
Well, there are a whole range of different elements. Certainly to find out more about the people who are buried in various cemeteries, but also to commemorate them, to recognise what they did, to learn about their involvement with Sutton. Were they local people? Were they buried here because they happened to be here when they died? There are a few pilots who crashed at one or two of our aerodromes who are buried here, but they came from places like Scotland and Wales. But we want to find out more about them. In addition to that, we want to provide information to people so that when they come and look at the graves in various cemeteries, they can read about them on interpretive boards that we want to set up. We also want to take exhibitions around the borough, and we want an enduring project so that if people adopt a grave, as we'd like them to do, perhaps uniformed groups, scouts or guides, that they can come along and look after the graves, maintain them, perhaps for years to come, and perhaps even when we have an anniversary, for them to come along and recognise that, laying flowers on the grave or something like that.
Now, with all projects like this, there's a certain element of money involved. So how is this being funded, and who else are you working with?
Well, we're working very closely with the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, who've got a lot of experience, obviously, in working with graves scattered around the country and also overseas. But the money is actually coming from the Heritage Lottery Fund, something over £9,000. And that will go towards research, it will go towards our exhibitions, it will go towards the interpretive boards we want to put up, and a number of other elements too that will be funded through that generous grant.
So part of this project is it as well to find some of the descendants of these people buried here?
That would be really fantastic, particularly if we could find somebody from in the borough who is descended from one of the people buried here. There is, for example, on the Brock's memorial, the name Groombridge, one of the munitions workers who was killed, called Groombridge. But there was also in another cemetery a soldier called Groombridge. We'd love to know whether they were related in some way.
One thing you've mentioned a couple of times is about people adopting graves. How can people or organisations or groups, how can they adopt a grave?
Well, we've already had approaches from a number of people who've read a little bit about it, but we'll be doing some more publicity and particularly aiming that at schools and uniformed groups like guides and scouts and other groups like that, air cadets, for example. And we hope that they'll approach us and say, yeah, we want to get involved. And that would be fantastic. But we're not confining it to younger people. We want everybody to feel a part of this project. All any members of the community who want to get involved. And as I say, we'll be publicising that quite widely.
Why do you think this project is so important?
Well, I think we've had an indication from the commemorations of the Great War already in the past couple of years, just how much people are involved and engaged by the story of what was one of the most dramatic and life-changing events of this nation's history. And this is really an opportunity for us to bring this to Sutton, because Sutton had a very important contribution to make in a number of different ways. That's represented by some of the people who are buried in our various cemeteries, the stories of Sutton's contribution to the Great War. And young people particularly, I think, have shown a real thirst for knowledge about what seems a little while ago now, but it's only 100 years. It's only a lifetime or so away for most of us.
So, Tony, finally, what are your hopes for the outcome of this project? And going forward, longer term, what do you hope will happen?
Well, we're being funded until the end of next year, but we hope it will continue for years to come, and that the information that we glean will be able to be passed on to the borough's heritage unit, so it'll be there for a reference for anybody who wants to find out about it. We hope that the website that we establish will continue in years to come, but also the people who are involved perhaps will continue to want to come down and commemorate the people who are buried in our various cemeteries, perhaps on the anniversary of their deaths each year, something like that. Well, this is one element of our project. The memorial we have here is to 5 munitions workers who were killed during the Great War, who worked in the Brock's fireworks factory in North Cheam, not far from here. And you'll see there are 5 names on here, badly faded, and one of the things we'd like to do, certainly to find out more about them, but also perhaps to do a little bit of restoration work on this memorial.
Because, yeah, they are, they're getting faded further down you go, don't they? And the dates also look slightly different as well.
Yeah, September 16, November 16, this is 1917 here in this one too. So it suggests that there were several explosions during the war when the Brock's fireworks factory was used as a munitions factory for arms and weapons to go off to the Western Front. Well, here's Charles Pratt, for example, aged 39 years, who died in September 1916. We'd like to know more about him. And down below we can just make out Eliza Bailey.
Oh, yes. So, yes.
And this is the one woman who's buried in a Sutton cemetery, and we certainly want to find out about her. And she was just 22 years old, and they made just as much of a contribution to the Great War effort as the people who went out and fought in France and Belgium. But it's very sad the way in which it's been neglected, and it's hardly readable now.
It's interesting, Tony, it hasn't taken us very long to actually find these and actually get them in clumps together, and here we've got a few all here, haven't we?
Yes, we've got about 6 here, all quite close together. Here we have Private Kenny, the Royal Army Service Corps, 5th of August 1990, probably died as a result of wounds from the Great War, but we want to find out just how he died. Private W.S. Thompson Military Medal. So he was obviously a brave person. Norfolk Regiment, July 1919, age 32. And again, Rifleman Buckingham, the Rifle Brigade. And so you have various graves here, gravestones here. All of them have stories. All of them are of interest to us, and we want to find out more about them.
Learning about the stories these graves represent and taking an active role in commemorating them, it's not only going to bring together local groups of today, but it's also going to ensure that their memory and their sacrifice lives on for generations to come.